This is Yonder Radio, Rural Conversations with National Reach. Hope you're doing well. My name is Jared Ewe, and I get to be here today kind of just gluing things together, not unlike Kermit in The Muppet Show, in between the acts, in between the stories. Let me just tell you what's happening. We have some musicians from Montana coming on, and you think you know cowboys and cowgirls. We're taking it to a whole new level, or at least Bridget and Johnny Reedy are. We're going to talk to them and hear their music. We have trivia on the way. We're going to go to Appalachia with an interesting tradition, decorating cemeteries. But first, it is, well, at least my tradition to see if I can make this guy laugh. He's preparing his news right now. And now we're going to bring him in. It is the news editor from the Daily Yonder newsroom, Jan Podolsky. What do you bring us today?
Hey, Jared. Today we start with Alaska Beacon and they're reporting on how the closure of Strait of Hormuz affects some of Alaska communities. We tend to think that America is fairly energy independent, and for the most part, it's true. But for communities in Western Alaska, including the Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula, or Bering Sea coast, a lot of their fuel comes from Asian refineries, which in turn get their oil through the Strait of Hormuz. So these communities are really scared of the potential hikes in costs, and the planning for the shipments is happening now. So no way of knowing how that will affect the future pricing.
Now, if you want to become a relevant rapper or poet, come up with rhymes for fragile supply chain. And then a phrase I never thought I would say 10 years ago, the Maha Revolt, which is Maha Make America Healthy Again. What is happening here?
Yes, Politico brings us a report about the Maha wing of the Republican Party threatening the passage of the Farm Bill. These folks are mostly upset about the provision within the bill that shields the pesticide industry from potential lawsuits. And in order to push this through, they actually teamed up with some Democrats, now putting the bill in real danger.
And then rural U.S. bears heaviest burden accessing dental care. What is this from the Harvard Gazette?
Yeah, so the Harvard School of Dental Medicine released a summary of a bunch of studies that basically proved that if you live in a rural community in America, you're most likely having harder time accessing dental care. On average, you will have to drive an hour or more just to sit in a dental chair. They found that 98% of dental specialists practice in urban areas. Really interesting part of it is that they also looked at the economics of that disparity and found that lack of those services is often tied to school debt carried by those dentists. So, folks with debt of approximately $200,000 to $600,000 were more likely to practice in underserved areas, while those with debts above $800,000 were far more likely to be found in urban parts of the country.
I grew up 2 hours away from our dental care, and we paid him in firewood and fence posts, which could be why I look like I'm part rabbit today.
We may be making a full circle. Maybe firewood will become a new currency for dental care.
Try that today, people. Bring in some household items and see what kind of dental care you could get. Well, Jan Podolsky, news editor of the Daily Yonder, thanks for stopping by.
Thanks so much, Jared.
And now Julia Tilton with a data center news update. Last week, Jan reported, thanks to you, Julia, your story on Maine, the first in the nation to have this moratorium on data centers. But now there's a change. Talk about the change in the governor and the drama. What is happening?
Yeah, so earlier this month, the Maine legislature voted in favor of an 18-month moratorium on data centers. And if that bill had passed with the governor's signature, it would have been the first such state level ban in the country. But when the bill made it to Governor Janet Mills' desk, she decided to veto this measure on Friday, April 24th. And she made that decision because the version of the bill that made it to her desk did not include a particular exemption from the moratorium for a community in rural Franklin County, Maine called Jay. Mills is a lifelong resident of Franklin County, Maine, and she made this decision because she wanted to see data center development in the community of Jay, where there is a former mill site, the Androscoggin Mill, that was closed down in 2023 and has left a lack of economic opportunity in this community.
And Maine on the forefront of this tech conversation. Does that even surprise them?
Yeah, it's interesting that Maine has found itself in the center of this data center regulation debate. It's also an interesting move from the governor because when the bill was making its way through the state legislature, there was bipartisan support, but there was overwhelming support from state Democrats. And Governor Mills herself is a Democrat, and yet she broke with her party and also had support from Mainers. There were a number of petitions that were circulated in support of a data center moratorium. There's an organization called Our Power in Maine, which advocates for energy democracy in the state. They sent out a petition to garner letters to the governor to urge her to support the bill. And they said they had an unprecedented level of response to that petition. Over 7,000 Mainers sent letters to the governor urging her to sign this bill, which ultimately she did not do.
Thank you, Julia. You can read more on this story as it unfolds at dailyyonder.com. But here on Yonder Radio, we talk a lot about rural healthcare. But what is it like to report on those stories? We go behind the scenes in the life of a reporter. With me now, Madeline de Figueiredo. You have been all over the country reporting on rural health, and this merits some behind the scenes because a lot of rural health is leaning on technology, but then you're going into places that might not have access to that technology. What is this like for you as a reporter?
My most recent reporting happened in my home state of Texas. I was covering rural telehealth in West Texas. And West Texas is truly expansive. And many of the counties there have limited broadband access. Over 20% of the population might not have broadband. I was covering Jeff Davis County, which has a median age of 58. And so these are folks who are older, maybe less familiar with technology, and also have less access to the connectivity that so many of us are used to. And I can just say from my own experience that, I'm a zillennial, kind of on that cusp of a Gen Z millennial. And there have been many times where I'm trying to log into a telehealth appointment, despite being a digital native, that I just cannot for the life of me figure it out. I have to call the doctor's office, get some tech support on the line. Broadband gaps, digital literacy gaps further complicates that. And then as a reporter, going into these places and trying to connect with folks who are largely offline and unfamiliar with their technology adds a whole new dimension to that reporting experience.
Oh, yeah. And the irony that it just can't be good for your health that you're coming apart trying to make it work.
Yeah, absolutely. And as a rural reporter, a lot of the same tools that telehealth providers rely on are the same tools that we as rural reporters rely on. I do a lot of phone calls. I do a lot of Zoom calls. Technology is one of my go-to tools. And yet this was a reporting experience where the purpose of the reporting was that those tools were not available.
Yeah, and so if you are in West Texas and you see a zillennial standing on the corner, kind of looking both directions, wondering where to go, just take you to the library, right?
Yeah, so it was actually really interesting because I started to think about, okay, I can't get in touch with folks directly. Where can I go to connect? I started thinking about what are the third spaces where people will be present, where there will be an active phone line, an active email access. And that was the library. As a reporter, I was kind of almost mirroring the pathways to access for this rural community where I was going to the same place they were going to connect, which in a lot of cases was a rural library or a rural clinic that was in a shipping container that, I talked to a nurse who was like, a lot of people just drop by to chat and have coffee with me.
Incredible.
I had another experience where I was trying to connect with somebody who I had briefly emailed with and then had kind of gotten silence from. And I knew that they were going to be, they took these classes at a local library. And so I just called the library and I was like, hey, I'm looking for this person who I've connected with. I'm having trouble, keeping this digital line of communication open. Any chance that you can direct me to the best way to contact her? And the librarian said, she's actually here for a class on Tuesdays at 5 p.m. Give me a call then. And in doing that, I was actually able to, via the library phone line, talk to this woman who was coming out of her class. And it was just a really unique way to see how these hubs of information and community gathering were also a hub for my reporting. It made me think about where to go to create pathways for access. And in doing that, I called the library and I was like, hey, I'm trying to do the story. I can't get in touch with folks. And then the librarian says, oh, interestingly, we have a telehealth hub here that they were already designing around these issues that existed that they were aware of. And they were not only just, a place for people to gather, but they were an expanding resource that acknowledged these gaps and were creating solutions on the ground as needed. I will say I talked to a handful of librarians across West Texas, and they not only manage books, they manage tools, they manage blood pressure cuffs, they manage active telehealth hubs. It seems to me that they can fill every single hat that the community would ever need.
I'm not sure if that's originally what they thought they would be doing when they went to library school, but it's all there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for this behind the scenes.
Thanks so much, Jared.
You can read more of Madeline de Figueiredo's healthcare reporting at dailyyonder.com. It's now time to learn about this week's musical guests, siblings Bridget and Johnny Reedy from Dillon, Montana. They are incredible musicians, but also deeply passionate about Western and cowboy life. So in this interview, they enlighten us about some of the intricacies of this culture. And they seem to get along really well, which parents listen and take notes of their tone. I don't know what it is, because I would like to talk to my teens about that kind of harmony. And here with both interpersonal and musical harmony, here's Bridget and Johnny. I was wondering, Johnny, if you could describe your sister right now, and Bridget, if you could describe your brother right now. Okay, Johnny, you're first.
All right. My sister has always been and continues to be my hero and my greatest friend. A lot of people ask when we're in our duo setting that it's like, oh, are you guys just playing together because you're siblings? Or it's no, I would have wanted to search this person out at the ends of the world. To describe her right now, she is a ray of sunshine. It is true.
Oh, geez, Johnny, talk about me next. What if she just roasts you right now? That would be amazing.
Yeah, I'm ready. She's like, she's got this dumb mustache and that stripy shirt.
He's
Why
okay. No, I special ordered Johnny. I was so committed to wanting a little brother. I waited 9 months for the custom order, and he absolutely has been perfect. I didn't even ask for him to be my band. He simply kind of emerged as just this brilliant character in my life that I feel like completes me in a lot of ways. And truly, he is my best friend.
I'm looking at your website, and you both are possessed with all these talents. And I'm like, from whence do these people come? What Western wizard taught you all this stringed instrument sorcery and equine mastery and leather bedazzling? Where does this come from?
Well, we were brought up in it. My mom and dad homeschooled both of us all the way up to college. And that really allowed us to dive really deeply into arts and culture, not as much as a hobby, but as like a full lifestyle. We were really lucky. We got brought up going to several different really active living scenes. National Cowboy Poetry Gathering in Elko, Nevada. Yeah. The old time fiddle scene in Montana that's alive and well. The Montana poet scene. One of the unifying, overarching things about both Johnny and I is that we seek connection. There's sort of a creative spark that we help build in each other, and that was fostered in us by our parents and our mentors, that kind of like lightning just looks for the right place to strike and connects where the energy's good, you know?
Because we're always, just like Bridget mentioned, always searching for connections, as rare and diverse as they might be. We've eventually formed connections that brought us to gigs in Ireland and in very different spheres, just by always cultivating these connections that, has worked in the really tightly knit communities that we grew up in. But the same methods have kind of held true for introducing us pretty far and beyond. I think that's really kind of a beautiful way to go through life, making those really personal connections.
And that was the way we were brought up. If we are truly ourselves and of a place, even if that is somewhat niche, if we are really authentic in that way, that's something that actually does carry out farther.
Okay, so the music. How are you coming up with new songs?
Just like Bridget was saying, like so many things in our life is always grounded in being of a place. But we kind of have this joke. There's one song we do that's a music box monkey that will sometimes be in these shows talking about what the Western lifestyle and the culture means, and really delving into these very authentic experiences tied to the land. And then we're like, now we have this really interesting song that's all about a monkey in New York City. But somehow, I think by being bound in what we are and being comfortable in that, we really look everywhere.
We were both just always encouraged to have the record button on mentally.
Exactly.
We listen as broadly as we can. I'm a huge lover of opera, as is Johnny.
Yes.
We listen very diversely, always kind of living with this retreating horizon of curiosity.
Yes.
We can always take what we like and leave what we don't.
We've never been limited by genre or place in that way. And that's just, it's so freeing.
Yeah, and it's exciting. And it's why you could, I hope to do this my whole entire life. And I
see no reason
never,
not to.
ever get bored,
Have you gone to less rural areas and people are wondering if you're real life?
Yeah.
Yes.
Even at home, sometimes, like, I love Bozeman. I go about every week because that's where my boyfriend lives. But I was walking down the street. I'd been working horses that morning, and I'm a very buckaroo aesthetic. There's an elegance and there's a style that goes along with the buckaroo stuff. But I'm just walking down the street, and this lady comes up and she goes, "Oh, where did you get your Yellowstone outfit? I'd love to get one too. Where did you get that?"
Talk about the buckaroo aesthetic.
Yeah, so for one thing, cowboy culture is highly regionalized. Stylistically, the horsemanship, down to the tiniest details,
Really?
do you buckle your spurs on the inside or outside of your boot? And people get into huge disputes about it. And everybody you talk to does it right. That if you're talking to an Arizona guy or a Nevada guy or California or Texas puncher.
Definitely the Texas puncher.
Yeah, maybe we have our own little vendettas, but the point is that, there's a lot of regional pride. So the buckaroo thing, it's a flatter hat, it's beautiful floral silver, the saddles are carved. There's a lot more old school, slow cattle handling, a lot more bigger country, like, you go trot out for 10 hours type of an approach. There's a real emphasis on the horse training, which is totally different than, say, even my boyfriend, who's very Texas puncher influenced, has rubber on his horn, drives me insane. Love him anyway.
Of course, it's more elegant. Is that what you're saying? Bridget, you're riding around on a horse playing fiddle. There's something that I noticed there is a real mastery of horse riding. You've developed some type of symbiosis. How do you describe what you have with your horse?
It's not so much what you do as how you do it. And horsemanship for me is philosophy. We joke that my brother and I were raised like horses, but that's kind of true. My dad was a huge follower and disciple of the Dorrances, Ray Hunt, Buck Brannaman, and the natural horsemanship movement, which is really about the philosophical and psychological underpinnings of horsemanship, which is generally understanding yourself well enough that you can present yourself in a relationship in an effective way.
Yeah.
Nothing teaches you more about yourself than working with a horse.
Yes.
They can already
That's for
do
sure.
everything. You watch a horse out in the pasture, they can slide stop, they can spin, they can back, they can do every dressage move anyone ever cooked up. You getting yourself mentally tuned in enough to ask for that effectively, to where you're not hampering the natural ability of the horse. That's the holy grail of the natural horsemanship world, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, Bridget and Johnny Reedy, this has been incredible. Stay tuned for more from them, including the beef they've developed between buckaroos and Texas punchers. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Rough stock and riders ready for the show, waiting for the rodeo.
That was Bridget and Johnny Reedy, a sibling duo musical powerhouse out of Dillon, Montana. And you can find both her and Johnny at bridgetreedy.com. That's BRIGID Reedy.com. Well, it's almost time for a break, but first, going to give you our first trivia clue. There will be 3 clues throughout the episode, and we'll reveal the answer at the end of the program. Here's your first clue for today. The answer to this week's trivia is a holiday that was first celebrated as Americanization Day in 1921. It was celebrated on May 1st as a counter to the labor-oriented International Workers' Day during the first Red Scare. So more hints coming up to the trivia. We're going to have more music from Bridget and Johnny Reedy. We're going to use the word archaeoastronomy because we're cool and smart. And if you got a band that needs a gig, you got to go to Del Norte or Del Norte, Colorado. That story is on the way on Yonder Radio. Yonder Radio, Rural Conversations with National Reach. I'm your host, Jared Iwi. Coming up, we're going to discuss archaeoastronomy and the very cool road-tripping ancestors who made us who we are today. But first, Susanna Brown talks to Rolf Potts. And Susanna, he doesn't need to hear he's not in Kansas anymore, right?
Absolutely, yes. Rolf Potts is a travel writer, and this means he travels all around the world, and every time he would introduce himself as from Kansas, he was amazed and then frustrated by how many people would tell him, "Oh, you're not in Kansas anymore." That prompted him to make the video essay that I talked with him about called Kansas Never Plays Itself, where he tries to give people other references beyond The Wizard of Oz, a very old movie that, as he discusses with me, is not filmed in Kansas at all. And he really uses this video essay to show media as a very powerful tool to build our understandings of people and places, and he focuses on Kansas.
And now Susanna Brown talking to author Rolf Potts.
What's the name of this video essay, and what is it generally about?
The video essay is called Kansas Never Plays Itself, and it's a riff on Tom Anderson's iconic 2003 essay film, Los Angeles Plays Itself, which is an intriguing look about how Hollywood has misrepresented the very city that is the filming location of so many movies. But Los Angeles Plays Itself can be exasperating since at least that city is a shooting location, whereas the most famous movie representations of Kansas are not even shot there. And these movies tend to treat it as a generic rural place that people want to leave. And as a person with a fierce pride for my home state, I wanted to explore why this was the case.
Toto, I have a feeling we're not in Kansas anymore.
I come from Kansas, and while it's nice to know that Dorothy loves her home as much as I do,
There's no place like home.
it's no particular secret that Judy Garland was never really in Kansas to begin with.
There's no place like home. There's no place like home.
Kansas is a place that doesn't appear much in the movies to begin with, and when it is depicted, some other place usually stands in for it. How loyal should we be to a place when we dramatize it on screen? What is lost when one place stands in for another?
Can you discuss some particular representations of Kansas, both give us the good and the bad, and what makes this distinction?
The iconic ones, there's The Wizard of Oz, but there's also Superman, and there's also, as I mentioned in the video essay, there's In Cold Blood. And what these movies have in common, as I say in the video essay, is that Kansas in these iconic movies and movie franchises isn't a place so much as an archetype. It's like a symbolic stand-in for home, and it's a place where wholesome white people live innocent lives that are more or less boring, and they're looking to find more adventure elsewhere. So the central cinematic representation of Kansas isn't an ugly one, like maybe people from Georgia bristle at the movie Deliverance. It is kind of irritating and insipid and not very representative of the place where I live. As for good representations, there's not a lot to choose from, which is part of why I made the video essay to explore the idea of why there's not a lot to choose from. A fairly exemplary Kansas movie is Gordon Parks' semi-autobiographical movie The Learning Tree, and it depicts the Black experience of Kansas in the 1920s. And so many other movies about Kansas would have you believe that there's no Black people in Kansas at all. The very title, The Learning Tree, comes from the most famous line in the movie, where the protagonist's mom urges him to think about his Kansas home in a nuanced way, even though he kind of wants to leave it. She says, "It's not an all good place, and it's not an all bad place either. It's sort of like the fruit on a tree. Some is good and some is bad. No matter if you stay or leave, think of Kansas that way until the day you die. Let it be your learning tree." And so I think the best distinction between a good representation and a bad one is whether the setting can encompass this kind of nuance.
And so with
that need for nuance and the importance of having depictions on screen that aren't just one tone or projecting stereotypes of a place and a people. Can you talk a bit about what is lost when a location is standing in for another place on screen? So you talk a lot about in your video essay that where they claim is Kansas is not actually being shot in Kansas.
Yeah, and the big giveaway is when you see mountains in the background, you know. But what you lose, I think, is the intangible nuances. You lose the true cultural texture and diversity of a place, and you lose the subtle ways that people interact as they live their days there. You lose basically everything but the received assumptions about a place. And oftentimes this leaves out the non-wealthy people of a community, that when you are a film executive placing a movie about one place in another place, then you are sort of going by the upper middle class assumptions of people who produce movies. Oftentimes those can be condescending towards people who live in rural places. So you lose the perspective of people who aren't urban or suburban or wealthy.
Yeah. What do you hope that audiences take away from your video essay, Kansas Never Plays Itself?
I hope they'll realize that any place in the world should not be understood through the lens of a single story, and that all places contain multitudes and multiple stories. And I hope that people, even if they're not from Kansas, will see their own home in it. I'd like to think that people could be from Queens and watch Kansas Never Plays Itself and think about the ways that Queens is overlooked in movies about New York, for example. Because Hollywood hasn't been very good at depicting all places in the movies. I think that filming Kansas stories in Kansas will allow those stories to flow out of the landscape and the communities that the filmmakers experience there.
Thank you for putting in clearly a lot of work into a very informative and thorough video essay. So if anyone has only ever thought about Kansas as maybe the Wizard of Oz or the idea that we're not in Kansas anymore, or wants to know more about representation in film, should definitely check out the video essay, Kansas Never Plays Itself.
I'm glad to have a chance to talk about it. It's a fun topic that I think about a lot.
That was Daily Yonder reporter Susanna Brown interviewing travel and culture writer Rolf Potts. You can find Rolf's video essay, Kansas Never Plays Itself, on YouTube. Now some music from Bridget Reedy and Johnny Guitar. This song is called High Country.
I look in the mirror and see my own possibility, a comma in the page of today. Why don't we just let the mood of our dreams off the line and away? Out of all these bottomlands and up above the tree lands where the peaks kiss the sun's fine ray. In the high country, in the high, in the high country, in the high country. I don't know, but I don't think people understand quite what they're saying and doing half the time. But I think too much, and I don't do enough to justify this big old ego of mine. Senseless sound with people all around who lack the space for a heart solemn rhyme. It's no life for me. I'd much rather be alone.
That was High Country from the Reedy siblings. This summer, they'll be artists in residence on a sailing ship off the coast of Maine. They're going to be doing a cultural exchange between cowboys and sailors, or approximately 2/6 of the village people. And now we turn our eyes to the skies. Kim Cobersmith here with Daily Yonder wrote the article Ancient Skies, Ancient Wisdom. Indigenous architecture from Ohio to the Four Corners region continues to awe researchers, revealing just how deeply these ancient cultures understood the rhythms of the cosmos. And that is a very long subtitle, but this article merits it. because it's a lot of information. And here's the thing that blows me away. I'm just going to get right to the blow away point here. It appears that ancient humans were kind of making road trips to Ohio. Is this what we're getting here?
That is true. In the Hopewell culture, remains of where their large-scale architecture was, they actually made earthworks that could be as large as 4 football fields. And there are also places that have found burial remains. And so is it believed to be like a spiritual and a celebratory place for burials. And so the artifacts that they found in those sites, as they have excavated it, they have found shark teeth from the Atlantic, obsidian that's traced to Yellowstone National Park, and seashells that come from the Gulf of Mexico. They understand that it could have been trading routes, but they also believe people were making pilgrimages there.
And these were the Hopewellians in Ohio that were building the big football field-sized monuments, or what are we calling these? It's architecture.
It's architecture, and yes, they're in Ohio, and they are believed to be celebratory gathering places, so thousands of people would have fit within them.
Were you able to find out how they're using this to align with what they're seeing in the sky?
Yeah. So as most people know, the summer and winter solstice is what the longest and shortest days of the year. And so on the summer solstice, the sun is going to rise and set the furthest north that it would. On those days, there's a certain place on the horizon where the sun's going to rise and set. And so if they were commemorating that experience on the solstice, they might have a special place, an opening, or it might be in the center of something, or a wall aligns with that. And so that points to the place where the sun is at its zenith.
And then you're seeing it's different architecture, but celebrating the same kind of thing in the Four Corners in Chaco Canyon.
That is correct.
This is from your article. On the summer solstice, a narrow beam or sun dagger, cool phrase, crosses the center of a man-made spiral hidden behind 3 large stone slabs. On the winter solstice, 2 daggers touch the edges of the spiral. And then another bug-like petroglyph captures the solar eclipse of 1097, complete with a corona. This seems intricate.
It's very intricate. Back then, the sky loomed large for early Native Americans. And so these celestial events were really revered as powerful eruptions of the sacred into the human world. And so they paid attention and they commemorated them. The solstice, we all kind of understand, is an annual cycle. But when you start looking at the lunar cycle, it's actually an 18.6-year cycle. And so in order to understand like the highest point that the moon rises in the north, these people would be watching generational observation to see and keep track of that, because it would take 18.6 years for it to reach its northernmost point.
I did not know about a lunar standstill. What is this?
I didn't either, and I still can actually not completely explain to you the lunar cycle because it's pretty complex. But the lunar standstill is when the moon rises at its northernmost point. And so there are places where the Chacoans, for example, at Chimney Rock National Monument, there's actually 2 towers, and the standstill happens between those 2 towers. So that's a natural phenomenon, but the Chaco people built a great house, perfect viewing spot of that. And when they've done dendrochronology, which is the study of the wood that it was used to construct this building, they understand that the years of construction on that building corresponded with significant cosmological events during that time period.
Well done weaving dendrochronology into your everyday conversation, because I was going to ask, what was dendrochronology? And this is the study of ancient wood?
The dating of wood.
A good vocabulary moment for our listeners, for all of us.
You can use it at your next cocktail party.
Totally. Well, this is a great article. Let me give you the read here. Ancient Skies, Ancient Wisdom on dailyyonder.com with Kim Cobersmith reporting. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Jared.
Coming up, another break, but now it's time for our second trivia clue. This holiday reemerged in popularity during the Cold War and was proclaimed a holiday by Dwight D. Eisenhower in 1955. And if you weren't here earlier, let me just go ahead and sneak you the first clue that it was a holiday known as Americanization Day. Congress added it to the calendar in 1958. So there's a salad of clues for you there. We'll get the final dressing and the full meal to you at the end of the show with the answer. And coming up, we're going to Colorado to a place called the Trade-in Post. A guy's not so great business idea turns into what has, I guess, already become a legendary place to play. That's coming up on Yonder Radio. Rural Conversations with National Reach. This is Yonder Radio. I'm your host, Jared Iwi, and coming up, going to be going to the Trade-in Post, where you can tether your horse and listen to your favorite death metal band. But now our segment from Living Traditions, a program of the Center for Rural Strategies that looks at folk life in Central Appalachia. This week, honoring ancestors is a human tradition that crosses all cultures. In the southeastern United States, this often takes the form of Decoration Day. That's when families come together in specially decorated cemeteries to celebrate their roots. In rural Pickett County, where Tennessee's Cumberland Plateau and Highland Rim collide, one family maintains one of Decoration Day's oldest traditions, a swept graveyard. Reporter Lisa Kaufman takes us to the 200th anniversary of their Decoration Day.
At the Winningham Family Cemetery, Carolyn Massengale is conducting a master class for her 3 granddaughters. The tools at hand are a garden hoe, rake, and broom. The topic, how to mound a grave.
What we do is take a hoe and rake dirt up to where the grave is at. And remember, it needs to be fairly straight.
Carolyn selects a grave for Haley, age 14, to mound.
This one right here, Hardin Winningham. Hardin was your 6th great-grandpa.
Haley swings the edge of a hoe into the packed dirt and drags it into a narrow mound above the grave, as her grandmother directs.
Dig down and pull it up. Dig down and pull it up.
Carolyn's teaching her granddaughters a practice that's been in their family for at least 2 centuries. The Winningham Cemetery is a swept cemetery, which means every last inch of its grounds will be hoed and raked down to the bare red clay dirt. That's done to clear all the debris, leaf fall, and scraggly plants that accumulate fast in these lush southern woods. Next, each of the cemetery's 51 graves will be freshly mounded. Last of all, everything will be broom swept until that red clay almost glows. It's all part of preparing the cemetery for the Decoration Day celebration, when kin will gather here from across the state and beyond. About 25 relatives have come out for 2 work days to prep the cemetery for decoration. There's a bustle of activity, the ruckus of chainsaws, a tractor moving dirt, and people hoeing and raking among the rows of graves. But it'll be worth the work, Carolyn says. Come decoration, all those grave mounds will be covered with flowers.
After decoration on Sunday, you can look back and it looks like lots of little flower beds here.
From April on into August, Decoration Day makes itself known throughout the Southeast, with entire graveyards suddenly spruced up and blooming. But there's one region where the tradition holds especially strong, says Joey Brackner, former state folklorist of Alabama.
It's really in Appalachian South where you get the fullest expression of Decoration Day. That's like the epicenter. This is honoring ancestors and strengthening family ties and community ties and maintaining a cemetery.
These days, tending cemetery grounds usually involves power lawnmowers and weed whacking. The swept cemeteries with their demanding physical labor have all but disappeared. At the Winningham Cemetery, Samantha Harding scrubs red clay film from a headstone. She's cleaning a headstone in a row that's special to her.
This is my grandparents and then my uncle, who I was really close with. You know, more than likely my parents will also be buried on this road.
Carolyn Massengale, readying another grave for mounding, reflects on why they do this year after year.
I can't really put it into words, except it's just our heritage. It's ingrained in us that this is what we do.
It's Decoration Day Sunday, and for its 200th anniversary, the Winningham Cemetery is filled with life. Kids run through the graveyard adding flowers to already decorated graves. There's a small band of family members playing music, preaching from a local pastor.
Oh, where's the thing of death going to be then? Old grave, where's your victory?
And after the prayer, a feast. The long table under the cemetery's covered shelter is crowded with the best from every kitchen. All told, 10 generations of Winninghams are gathered at this decoration, if you count the ones above and below ground. The youngest is a month and a half old. The oldest is Anita Beeson, mom of 5, grandmother of 15, great-grandmother of 21.
I'll be 84-year-old next month, and I've come every year but one. Family togetherness means more to me than anything, and I'm just proud of every one of them.
That was Decoration Day in Pickett County, Tennessee, a truly special occasion. And thank you, Lisa Kaufman and Living Traditions, for teaching us about these remarkable practices across Appalachia. Now, our next guest runs just about the coolest business you can think of. As a matter of fact, if you're driving through Del Norte or Del Norte, there's controversy on that. If you're driving through town, you will see a big marquee that just says beer, and that is the Trade-in Post. And with me now, the founder of the Trade-in Post, Paul Fennell. Tell us more about what goes on in this place. Give us a walkthrough.
Yeah, so the Trade-in Post, we have actually 2 rooms here on Main Street in downtown Del Norte. We started as a record shop, so we will always be a record shop. We're a bottle shop, beer and wine. We have a pool table here. Mainly, this is just a meeting place for our community. Really, this is like an extension of my living room. So all the things that you would expect me to be doing in my cabin at home are kind of what go on here, right? We're listening to music, we're talking, we're sharing ideas and stories. And then every now and then we have artists come and play our listening room. So that's the second room that we have. We've kind of morphed into a live event space.
What you've created is the actual embodiment of likely what a lot of people sitting in a living room drinking beers think they want to do. They're like, you know what we should do? We should create a place just like this. But you did it, and it worked.
Everyone wants to wear Carhartt until it's time to do Carhartt shit, right? Like everyone fantasizes about how nice it would be and how glamorous it is to host concerts and hang with rock stars.
But there's work. There's a lot of Carhartt work.
There's a lot of Carhartt work that goes into it, but it doesn't feel like Carhartt work if that's what you would be doing with your time anyways. If these are the people that you'd like to surround yourself with, if you like conversations with artists. I was fortunate enough that I kind of had a primer to this back in, it must have been 2002. I dropped out of college and went on tour with my friend's pop punk band. I sold merchandise. So I was no stranger to being in a different city every night of the week, sleeping in the van or on Motel 8 floors. And I think a lot of what we're doing here and the hospitality we're able to extend to artists that are traveling is built off of that empathy.
Well, from the Paul who was in his living room dreaming up this idea to the person I'm talking to now, what have you learned about people, about business, about community that you're like, oh?
Jared, I've learned a lot of lessons.
Are you going to cry?
We'll save that for later. I'll hold back the tears through this. I've learned a lot of things as to number one is like whatever you plan on your vision be open to the idea that it's going to evolve over time. When I first opened this place, the idea is that we were going to be a record shop that was going to sell camping supplies because we are on the Great Divide Trail and we have a lot of people who are coming to seek the outdoors. So Jared, I thought this is a gold mine, right? Everyone's going to come and buy their camping supplies from me and they'll listen to some records, drink a beer, and I'll be a millionaire in no time. And the reality is that everyone came here already with their camping supplies, right? They didn't need it from me. But it did bring the most interesting people off the trail to buy propane and to have conversation. And that's kind of how this all started, was having a space for people to come to and have conversations.
What can people expect as far as bands? How many nights a week do you have a band in at the Trade-in Post?
Yeah, well, we've been hosting music for a year and a half, Jared, and the first, I would say, 9 months was me just cold calling, DMing, emailing artists that I admire and respect and not hearing anything back. So the first few months, we were lucky if we had 3 artists a month that we could convince to come to a county they've never been. Fast forward now a year and a half, I think we have 12 shows in May, and I don't think a day goes by that someone doesn't reach out asking to play.
That's a short amount of time to ramp up to where you are. And I think it just speaks to how your passion is translating into this space. I understand that you're kicking open the doors to all kinds of different music in the San Luis Valley. Give me a sample of your genres that might be breaking expectations on Main Street down there.
Yeah. So when I opened up the record shop, it was just my records. It was a few thousand records, but it leaned towards my taste. And I was met with the fact that, well, not everyone listens to the music you listen to. And really, diversity is the most important thing in any ventures like this. Our music certainly lends itself to the singer-songwriter, someone who can come by car or motorcycle with their songs and their guitar on their back. But with that, the shows that I've been most impressed with are the ones that I felt some hesitance towards in booking. This past December, we had our first sold out show, and it was a death metal band. And I think that kind of diversity, letting everyone know in our community and the surrounding communities that there's a place for you here, is the most important thing. And that's going to be all different styles of music.
Well, when you hear the name of your business, the Trade and Post, and you think of like horses tethered outside and, dust devils spinning by, death metal doesn't come to mind, but you're making that so, and that's appreciated.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, and you're welcome to bring your horse to a death metal show. I think a lot of people actually in rural communities, you're blue collar, you're dealing with issues of poverty and social status. And I think death metal and punk rock speak to people probably a lot more than a lot of country music that you hear out there. So
Well said. Paul Fennell, who I believe is a reincarnated cowboy from the Old West who wanted to do what he's doing now, but the time forced him to be a cowboy, and now he's come back to start the Trading Post in Del Norte, or Del Norte, Colorado. Its pronunciation is not what this show is about. It's about people like Paul making things happen in rural communities, and I greatly appreciate the time.
thank you, Jared. We don't care how you pronounce Del Norte, so long as you're talking about us, we're happy. I appreciate what you do. Thanks for making the time for us today.
You can check out the store and the lineup of musicians. Oh, and there's wine at tradeandpost.com. And now we're on to our final trivia clue before the big reveal. This week, we have a special guest who knows a thing or two about this holiday to walk us through the answer. So here's the final clue. The longest continually running celebration of this holiday takes place in Long Beach, Washington, population 1761. They've been celebrating every year since 1950. Do you know the answer? Drum roll, please. The answer is Loyalty Day. Here is the director of the Rural Assembly and Miss Loyalty herself, Madeline Matson.
Yes. Hi, I'm Madeline Matson, and I was crowned Miss Loyalty in 2006.
I wish all of you could see her now because she is actually wearing her Miss Loyalty crown.
I had to. I mean, this is an official duty.
What goes into winning Miss Loyalty?
Yeah, you have to write some papers about why your community is important to you, what loyalty means to you. And we had to then spend a couple of months greeting people in the community, meeting local leaders. And then it all kind of culminates in an evening celebration and coronation where you have to give a speech, you have to answer some questions, like kind of a mini Miss America in a way, but no bathing suits. We got to wear big ball gowns, and it was quite fun. It was a really wonderful experience when I was growing up, and I'm really excited that it is continuing as well.
Can you explain what goes into the longest running Loyalty Day celebration in America?
Yeah, so it's a weekend-long event. It starts on Saturday with a kids' parade. And then there's also a blessing of the fleet, which is where people go out on boats out of Oahu, and they bless the fishing fleet, but they also recognize people who have been lost at sea. And then Sunday is kind of the big day where there's a big, large parade in downtown Long Beach, and people travel from all around the region to participate. And then little events kind of change every year, but those are the highlights of the weekend.
Loyalty Day royalty. Madeline Matson, thank you.
Thank you so much for having me, Jared.
This has been Yonder Radio, Rural Conversations with National Reach. My name is Jared Iwi. I love being your host, and thank you for stopping by every week with us. You can learn more and listen anytime at yonderradio.com. Thank you for listening to Yonder Radio, a production of the Center for Rural Strategies, publisher of the Daily Yonder. I'm your host, Jared Ewing. The Living Tradition segment was produced by Nicole Musgrave. Thanks to Don Castle and the Tennessee Sheiks, Steph Gunno and the Lone Tones, Quincy Ponfair, Leo Posel, and Tim Merima for the great music. Our editor and producer is Susanna Brown. This episode was also produced by Anya Patron-Slepian with additional support from Alana Newman and Julia Tilton. Our executive producer is Joel Cohen. The executive in charge of production is Adam Georgie. Yonder Radio, rural conversations with national reach.